Welcome to the Cyber Call, the podcast by Ride of Boom for managed service providers looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Each week, we dive into the latest threats, trends, and real-world strategies to help MSPs protect their clients and grow their businesses. Let's build a safer, stronger community together.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday. And it is good to see everybody here on Restream. It's actually functioning properly. Scott, little background joke, not really, but we've had some problems with Restream where only one person can get in. And then, we take what's typically a group environment like this and it becomes a one-on-one interview, but looks like everything is functioning properly today. And as people get in, it takes a little bit of time before we get up to full strength here. Just do a touch of banter and talk a little bit about, let me just find it here, which is, now, again, you can see this in many different industry rags, as it were, which is the infrastructure and Canvas. Call it. I don't necessarily want to assume it's a breach. Let's just call it incident at this point. Obviously, Shiny Hunters is saying it is a breach based on that they're going to release all this data, and I wanted to simply pose the question, since we're talking about CMMC today with Scott, who we'll introduce shortly. Some rumblings, Scott, have been, let me just stop sharing this. There's been rumblings that maybe CMMC should become a standard across critical infrastructure, right? There's been so much time and investment in this standard. And as we saw painstakingly, right, finally get it over the finish line. One might ask, well, gosh, why would the federal government consider anything but this? Again, going across nuclear or communications or banking or water, etc. And although universities and schools don't necessarily make it into the 16. One might argue it is critical, right? And we're seeing these constant supply chain attacks. So just wanted your thoughts on that and as you look at this incident.
Sure. It's unfortunate, obviously. And it doesn't sound like at this point, that, well, I can't comment because I don't know all the particulars. But yes, I do think some type of framework is really important to be rolled out across many different industries. NIST 800-171 obviously was, well, maybe not obviously for people on the phone or the webinar, but it was generated to protect controlled unclassified information. And it was really focused on confidentiality and kind of misses a little bit of things in integrity and availability. However, I think it's a great place to start as having some kind of a security framework in place. The second thing is that we have found, and I know Joy will back me up on this, that self-attesting that you're meeting some framework has not been very successful. Mm-hmm. Okay? We found it really is important to have a third party come in and do a check. It really kind of forces you to start doing stuff that maybe you haven't done before. And so from those perspectives, I do think it is a great kind of framework to go with. And it should be broader than what it is today. I know, for example, GSA in the government has started to talk about rolling it out. Now, there's some complexities there, right? Because they want to go with revision 3 instead of the current revision 2 that DOD is using. And I think there should be some consistency. Otherwise, if you're selling to the DOW and you're also selling some GSA contract and you have to meet two different frameworks, that becomes difficult. We have to make sure we don't kill the small businesses too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, I love your point about self-attestation, because if that was working, this getting people through assessments would be pretty quick and pretty painless. And we know that's far from that. Phyllis, when you look at Canvas, I gotta believe maybe there's been some rumblings in the ISAC about this, because a lot of these might be, state government. I'm sorry, state universities.
Yeah.
And what are you hearing? What's been the rumblings there?
I actually just met with some K-12 folks in California just this past week, and MSPs that actually support K-12. And so there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of work being done trying to figure out what was compromised, what wasn't compromised. Student data is very important. It has, that's PII right there. It's got medical records. It's got, if you're on a IEP, your grades, all that kind of stuff. And so it's a lot of PII data that schools are obligated to protect. And, we're talking, it's difficult, like, for these schools, because a lot of the teachers nationwide have admin access, because, they go to a conference, they find a different kind of Kahoot, the gamification of learning, they go back, they download it, all these things. So the way that K-12 and K-16 work is different than most enterprises. This idea of expanding CMMC, I think we need to be very careful, because it's very expensive. And, for example, the state of California has 1,100 different school districts with multiples of schools in the different schools, or maybe 1,100 schools. And you can't expect a publicly funded organization to be able to pay a third party to do that kind of evaluation. And, another note is public schools don't have a budget for cyber. That's just the way it is. They have no budget for cyber. All their budget goes towards education. So much so that, I've worked with K-12, like they can't meet the training, provide training for your staff, because the teachers union fights it. They're like, you can't do anti-phishing training. You can't get my teachers in trouble. An hour of training for my teachers has to go towards education and how I teach my children. So, it's like a different mindset.
Yeah.
That we have to go through. It's funding. There's a lot of things that have to come into play for, all of that to work properly.
Let me leave you with one other thing, and I'll get your comment and turn it to Brian. To changing subjects, and the CBEs, basically, no more, other than things that are related to CISA-KEV, things that are in, critical infrastructure or the federal government, everything else. Forget Chris Hughes, who I hope we can get on the cyber call. I reached out to him, who did just a absolutely phenomenal job articulating what's going on in this area, Phyllis. It seems ironic at the most. Mythos comes out and we're like, oh, and by the way, we're no longer doing anything around CVEs if it's not related to the federal government. So good luck to you. Where are we going to end up here? And, you obviously went through something in essence similar with, being, the MSISAC being funded and all these other things. So, and trying to, self-fund it, and good for you guys really working hard to do that. Is where do you think we go with CVEs?
Oh, I thought you meant Brian first, but
yeah,
okay.
Well, just real quick, and then I'll hand it to Brian.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what you'll see is Europe is actually trying to do something. So here in the US, we tried to get some self-funded efforts done around CVE, but they ran into funding. Someone, Eric wrote no budget for cyber, and that's the issue. It is, right? So, you know,
good thing it's not involved with kinetic war or anything like that. So
yeah, right. And so, you know, what we've seen is funding for cyber across the board, for at least on the defensive side, go down. There's been some definitely a little more effort put in on the offensive side right now. So, yeah, I mean, it's an issue. And so what you see is Europe really is coming forward with like an EU CVE. I think there's a couple efforts and they're trying to be compatible with the US CVE. But this last year and a half has shown kind of the rest of the world that they can't be dependent upon a US government funded CVE, that they have to do something else. So what you'll see is the pickup overseas, and then maybe that's something we're going to have to start using.
Interesting. Brian, do you think I don't know, will, you know, these frontier models, will they maybe start throwing in some money for this? Because they certainly have the attack chain, you know, figured out for it. But do you think that could be the answer?
Yeah, and I'll circle back to that Andrew, but something that both Scott and Phyllis chimed in on that I'd just like to add a little bit here too is we're in the age of AI. And when you think about 30 million users for the Instructures Canvas product, think about all that data that's out there now. Chat sessions were leaked out as well. So AI, combine that, and bad actors are going to be able to craft some very good phishing emails and some very good targeted campaigns, being able to leverage this data if they indeed have it. So, and a lot of this is, to Phyllis's point, a lot of this, if you read canvases, and this is traditional in this kind of market, a lot of the notifications and a lot of the stuff gets pushed back onto the schools and universities and programs that utilize the Canvas application, right? So from a contractual liability perspective, a lot of that gets pushed back on them. So those are the things that come to mind for me. The other thing was leveraging CMMC and NIST 800-171. Scott makes a great point, right? CMMC is incredibly myopic, right, in its view around CUI and confidentiality. So it could be a derivative of 800-171 just to capture kind of a broader program. But then I say that, and I'm schizophrenic there a little bit. It's like, oh my gosh, not another framework or another standard. Can we just embrace one and lean into it? But that's some of the thoughts there on those topics.
All right. Well, in interest of time, Miss Joy needs to leave at the bottom of the hour. She's first up. I'm going to do a quick setting the stage and let Scott do his intro and hand it to Joy. So CMMC, as we know, is no longer theoretical. Rules final, clock's ticking. And every MSP that's working with folks in the DIB is going to find out if the work actually holds up in an assessment. Speaking of which, Joy, congratulations to Summit 7. Hitting a major milestone, their 100th assessment. That is absolutely phenomenal. And if you think about that out there, based on the estimated 1,000, you guys are 10%, if not more, of the entire DIB so far. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. And again, you guys should be really proud what you guys, you and Scott, are doing over there. So we wanted to cut through the noise today and bring somebody on that actually sits in the chair across from you if you're an MSP that's going to go through an assessment. And Scott Singer both has an amazing background, combat veteran, C3PAO, chair of the Cyber AB, and was the CEO of Cyber9s, which is now a control case company. Congrats on that, Scott. You head up as president now of Control Case's federal division. And so let's get into demystifying what the C3PAO's role is. The so-called backlog. Are we going to all be sitting around waiting and not be able to get through this? So with that, Scott, welcome to the Cyber Call. Tell us a little about yourself and give it over to Joy. You'll take it from there.
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. Appreciate it. And Yeah, I have been in the Navy. Well, I was in the Navy 30 years. So, first of all, this is near and dear. The mission of this is near and dear to my heart. And it's, I sometimes think that realistically, I could be having more impact on the military than I had in my 30 years in the Navy doing what I'm doing right now with assessing companies. And I bet you Joy feels similar in that respect, this mission driven kind of perspective. So and I was a part-time Navy guy, 16 years active, 24 active, 24 reserve, 6 active. I'll get it right. And then I spent 16 years medical device. You think medical device is very regulated, compliance driven, and that kind of got my head thinking about this space a bit. And then I spent 10 years with a medium-sized defense contractor. And that's where I really learned. If you go back to 2013, that's the first time these requirements were actually came out. Everybody says 2017. That's because NIST 800-171 came out then. But people actually had to meet this more complicated framework, 853, before that. So I was working on this back in those days because we were directly for the Navy as a prime. And then during COVID, which is a tough time to start a business, I started Cyber9s. And then recently, obviously, you just pointed out, we got bought by Control Case. For me, it's fun because realistically, there are 2 C3PAOs that I'm running now and a FedRAMP 3 PAO. And believe it or not, there's a lot more overlap and similarities there that maybe people meet the eyes. That's me, a quick background.
Awesome. Joy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And Scott, first of all, thank you for your service. It's deeply meaningful to me. And it's great to see you again. Andrew, thank you for the acknowledgement on our 100 certification assessments. It's a big deal for the industry and for Summit 7. Scott, I know you fairly well, I would say, and looking at all these different hats that you're wearing between, running 2 C3PAOs, becoming the president of the Federal Division for Control Case, and as you so aptly have it right now, yes, the Cyber ABs, you're head of their advisory council, the chair of the advisory council, and apparently a fisherman. You've got all these things that you wake up every morning. Which of those roles is going to take the majority of your calendar, your time, your focus, and which of those keeps you up at night the most?
You were nice enough to share this question with me ahead of time, so I had to really kind of think about it a little bit. I think it's the C3PAO hat that keeps me up at night the most. I'm so focused on delivering quality, consistent assessments. And as we grow our teams, we have to focus more on process and less on kind of specific individuals. So, and if you think about it, we have 7 teams doing assessments now at any one time. And that's 3 people per team. So there's 21 people out there providing assessment guidance, right? And so I get really, concerned that we're giving consistent advice, consistent assessments, that we're not people having different interpretations of how things work. And that's also why I really wanted to get involved in the industry too, is wanting C3PAOs and everybody's assessors to be providing consistent guidance and not to be looking at a control this way versus another way. That makes it very hard for defense contractors if they've got all different ways they've got to think about how to answer or deal with whatever that control is. So I think, that's probably the biggest thing that kind of gets me stressed and up at night.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I'm on one of the subcommittees for the Cyber AB's Advisory Council, working on the CMMC assessment process document. And there is so much to wade through in the comments that have been submitted and improvements that we're making. So it's, to me, it's wonderful that that's rolling up to you and to your team to ensure that everything is consistent. So, well done. And then I'm looking back at some information you shared about your background and that I know about you. One of the things to me that is just huge is when you were at Medtronic and you were the Senior Director of Corporate Security, you had security running across 368 facilities in 120 countries. Is that right? That's insane.
That is correct.
What responsibility and like it's like a small country's national security apparatus, right? That you're in charge of. And when you look at something of that scale and that complexity and the sheer surface area of what you're responsible for, do you have any lessons that you would carry forward into every C3PAO assessment that you're now in charge of as you go through these CMMC level 2 assessments?
So one thing I can tell you I haven't had to deal with is trying to get somebody out of a country in the middle of a combat zone where I've had to call people to bring in, mercenary kind of troops. Anyway, I won't go there, but I haven't had to deal with some of those kind of, or not off-label uses of pacemakers would come up a lot in different places. So I haven't had to deal with too much of that in this new role. But if I look back, at the complexity and, I think there's probably 2 or 3 lessons that I brought to my role running a C3PAO. And I would say the first is that it taught me to eat the elephant one bite at a time. You probably heard that before, but the point being is we got to break down problems into smaller parts. Okay. You look at it, 368 facilities, 120 countries. How do you manage something like that? Well, you got to break it down. And the second lesson I would say is that when leading a large organization like that, you have to set the tone and the direction, okay? Train your people and then get out of the way. So it's really having good teams of people and setting them off in the right direction was something that I've really kind of brought into this role now. So hire smart people, push decision-making as far down in the organization as you can. And in this case, it's down to the lead CCA to kind of CMMC certified assessor. They're the lead for the assessment team. Support him or her as they're doing the assessments, and then deal with the escalations that as they arise and support them, I guess is the best way to put it. So a couple of different things I've tried to translate into a job like that into my current role.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the C3PAO role in these assessments, there's some things that I think are tripping up people in the ecosystem around the C3PAO's role. And can you just kind of expand a little what it is allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, like just at the highest levels, because I think people get that confused quite a bit.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think as humans, it's in our nature to want to help, right? We want to help people. We don't, there's kind of a natural tendency. So when you go in and you do an assessment, you want to help the company when you see something that needs to get fixed, or, the documentation doesn't look right, or, whatever the situation is, you want to jump in and say, hey, I know how to help you do this, right? Well, as an assessor, you can't, okay? You can basically tell them that they're not meeting the requirement, and you can tell them why they're not meeting the requirement, You don't have a procedure for this. Your setting in, the environment is different than what you wrote down on paper. You can't tell them how to fix it or what, the setting should be. Okay. But at least you can go that far. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would put out that C3PAOs are not supposed to do, is provide consulting to the company. Now, just to kind of go a little further, I've heard different people have different interpretations on this, but there's something that we call a mock assessment, and then we have the actual CMMC level 2 assessment. Well, the mock assessment, you have to run the same way. Just because you're doing a mock assessment for a company that you're later going to do the level 2 CMMC assessment for, you still have to follow the same process. You can only tell them whether they're meeting the requirement or not. So anyway, that's probably enough on the subject, Joy, but it's probably the biggest issue is the consulting.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you for touching on that. And then my last question would be that there's a perception that hiring a C3PAO is like hiring an auditor who's secretly rooting against you, like looking for a way to take you down, make sure you don't pass this assessment, right? But what's the actual posture a good C3PAO is going to take when they walk into an assessment?
The good C3PAOs, they want companies to pass. All right. We don't want companies to fail, right? So when I talked about the mock assessment, that's kind of like, if I can I really try hard to talk them into that, because that really helps companies pass. Okay. And this is difficult though, because there are assessors that want to prove they're the smartest person in the room. There are assessors that really want to go after and find that one thing that's going to fail the company. And that's where the C3PAO comes in. And remember when I was talking about setting the right tone in, the vision, the C3PAO can set that tone for the assessments they're doing, that, hey, we want companies to pass. All right. Let's not make the enemy a good perfect here. Right. Because we've got 118,000, I think the number's quite a bit more, but that's what the DoD's put out, 118,000 companies that need to get CMMC level 2, right? That's a lot of companies. And if we get so caught up in every little minutia, every little detail, and find reasons for companies to fail, then we are really going to, in the end, overall hurt the security posture of the defense industrial base. So, personal opinion.
Quick question to that, Scott, if I could, Joy. And from a macroeconomic standpoint, Scott, aren't we going to push costs higher too? I'm not saying to push people through, but if all of a sudden, a prime has to now go and get somebody else or source materials in a faster timeline than they expected, and someone's got to ramp production, can't we have literally impact on cost?
Oh, and of course. And just, taking care of the warfighter, right? If we can't get the things that they need, then that's going to be an issue, obviously, for being able to execute on the mission of the DOW. So, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Joy, I know you got to drop, but I wanted to thank you. And please give Scott my best and tell him again, the team, congratulations. Fantastic.
I will do. Thanks, you guys. Good to see you.
Good seeing you, Joy.
You guys. Yeah, enjoy. Scott, question in the before I hand it to Brian, question in the chat by Stephen Hicks was about mock assessments. He said, is the process similar to a private audit, effectively a mock assessment guidance to solve situations, and then a full audit? Is that a similar type of scenario?
So it's really a NIST 800-171 assessment.
Okay.
It's not a CMMC level 2 assessment. In fact, you really should be putting on the deliverable for that assessment, a disclaimer that says it's not. and a CMMC level 2 assessment. And the DoD actually gave us the verbiage we're supposed to use for that. So that even tells you that it's supported by DoD. I still have I'm getting better at going from DoW or saying DoW now, but it's still kind of, when you've been in 30 years, it's hard.
Yeah.
So, another way to look at it too is the CMMC assessment process has 4 phases. And phase 1 is when the assessment starts. All right. I tell people that the mock assessment is phase 0. Okay. It's not part of the CMMC level 2 assessment process, but if you give any kind of consulting during that mock assessment, you've now taken yourself off from the ability to do the actual assessment.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Got it. Because there's the conflict of interest. You've helped. So therefore you're kind of given the answers that you're going to have to assess going forward.
Correct.
Got it. Brian, that's why you get thrown off all these assessments.
Well, funny, Andrew. But I strongly echo any MSP that's out there that's either advising or helping their client or themselves. The mock assessment is, I think, a no-brainer, right? It costs a little bit more, but it's going to help you a lot for all the reasons Scott mentioned. But also, contrary to popular belief, auditors and assessors are people too. They have bias and subjectivity, and it's a great way to kind of get to know your assessor before it really counts, to really understand, okay, this C3PAO and this assessor, this lead CCA, this is kind of where they're going to lean into a little bit. This is where we've got to be a little bit sharper. And so it's a good kind of get to know you initial engagement before you, and when you go through a mock, it can help shrink in some cases, not all, the length of time of the full assessment too. Right, so there's a lot of advantages to doing the mock. Strongly encourage you spend the extra money to do that. It'll pay dividends. And again, Scott, thanks for your service. Something you mentioned, this is off script a little bit, but it's something I've seen. I've only been in about half a dozen C3PAO-led CMMC L2 assessments. But you mentioned consistency in the assessment experience with Joy. My observation in those handful is there's a wide range. It's kind of the Wild West. CMMC is pretty new, especially compared to ISO and SOC and some of the other ones that have been out there. There's just, in my own opinion, a wide range of subjectivity among lead CCAs, and it makes it incredibly difficult to get contractors ready and even not just in documentation, but what technical evidence might fly in one scope doesn't fly in another. Right. So it's just really difficult. So how do you make it more consistent? I mean, there's already a pretty good assessment guide, in my opinion. What else can we do?
All right. So
which role are you? What hat you got on there?
I am not speaking for the Cyber AB. However, I'm going to talk about how they can have a role in this process. Okay. So I'm not going to bash them either, but I wish they had started the C3PAO Advisory Council a year earlier. Okay. Because what we're doing is we're trying to take lessons learned, and maybe that's part of the problem too, is getting some of the lessons learned, right? We're taking those and we're then putting them into this thing that's going to be called a body of knowledge. And this body of knowledge is going to be embraced by both Cyber AB and DOW. And it's going to get down into scenarios and examples of how to go about assessing a certain type of situation. DOW just came out with a frequently asked question around significant change, for example. Well, it still leaves a lot of interpretation in what they put out. And so we would go a step further and provide, okay, I'm going to add this new piece of software to my system. Do I need to go out and get a significant change or not? Well, obviously it sort of depends, but we want to give examples that would resonate with people, that would become, this is similar to this, therefore. And then the way that this can become enforceable over time, because that's the next thing. Okay, so what, right? People don't have to go look at the body of knowledge. They can just ignore it and still have different interpretations. Well, one of the ways where this might help is that if during an assessment you disagree with an assessor, you can appeal the process, right? So it appeals to the C3PAO, and maybe the C3PAO goes, you know what? I agree with my assessor, and we're going to stay the course on our interpretation. And then the company goes, well, I still don't agree. You can then appeal it to the Cyber AB. And then they have a group of people that are going to look at the interpretation and decide, well, guess where they're going to go they're going to go to the body of knowledge.
Precedent, right?
Yep. It's sort of like, a legal precedent. It's not a legal document, but it's guidance, right, on how to do it. So that will create, I feel, over time, things will start to get more consistent over time, because you're right. It's a little bit of the Wild West. It's new, everybody's got a different idea, and we've got to kind of bring it together. So
yeah.
Well,
Thanks for
hopefully,
that,
Brian, that'll help with like some of the FAQs you get all the time, right around, what store transmit processes versus what's telemetry.
Well, a lot of what I get is around just simple, just lies and myths and things out there around FedRAMP requirements and especially the difference between ESPs and CSPs and some of that. So, and it's well documented. That to me is a little bit more cut and dry. But Scott, thanks for fielding that, because consistency is probably the number one challenge that I see out there. But back to some of the line of questioning. What's the single biggest misconception, or I'd say myth, you've encountered about what the CMMC assessment days actually look and feel like, and how's the reality different from what contractors might be expecting or might be thinking that they're going to see?
I think the biggest misconception is how detailed and difficult the assessment is. Okay, it's not an ISO audit, right? It's a point in time whether you're meeting these requirements or not. And so assessors walk through all 110 controls and all 320 assessment objectives. And when we, as assessors, are assessing a company, we have this Excel spreadsheet that was given to us by the DOW, and it has 320 lines in it. We have to answer why they're meeting each one of those in this spreadsheet, all 320. And we have interview, we've got test, and we've got examine. And those are our three different things we look at to see if they're meeting the requirement. That's the detail that this is going. And I think people sometimes just aren't prepared for that level. Again, that's why the mock assessment is so good, because you can really see what's going to happen here and how the assessment's going to run.
Yeah, and having the depth, right? The adequacy and sufficiency of the evidence. There's
Right.
a lot of people out there, hey, let's build this shiny new enclave and get that point in time. It's like, hey, you have to have enough of the right kind of evidence here, and a shiny enclave might not be enough. So,
Agree.
So Scott, we all hear about, and you brought up the 118,000 or whatever it is, but we all hear about the assessment and C3PAO backlog. From your perspective, Scott, is the C3PAO backlog real, or is it exaggerated, or something else, right? We all hear, again, about the tens of thousands of contractors needed assessments, and there's only a handful or hundreds of assessors. I personally see a lot more bottleneck and contractors being ready, but actually ready, not so much a C3PAO, because there's been a lot of false starts and stuff, right, for C3PAOs and that kind of thing. But what's your take on that, Scott?
So I would start with the good C3PAOs do have a backlog. Okay. And it can be from 2 to 3 months on average is what I sort of see. Okay. Normally that's fine, because, when you want to schedule somebody that you want them to go through the mock assessment, you want them to do so that normally will be just fine. I think we have plenty of assessors, okay, from what I can tell. I don't run into too many issues being able to find resources to do assessments. And you are spot on. The biggest issue we run into is companies not being ready. For me, as a business practice, I really look strongly for companies that have been referred to me from a trusted source. And that is a big indicator of success. If I get it from a C3PAO I know, an RPO I know, that's going to be much more successful. And but when they come in and the internal IT guy has done it, he's not a CCA, then I normally tell them to go find some help. And I know I've kind of, knocking on this mock assessment thing, but that is one of the key successes, key indicators of success on an assessment is if they've gone through the mock assessment with us.
Brian, can I chime in there a sec? Yeah. So Scott, it's almost like, you become a world-class cardiovascular surgeon. It's like, seriously, it's like you want to have good referral sources, right? If in other words, okay, yeah, this internist or this pulmonologist, they always give me, I know that if this person's coming across referred, it's a good case.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what I'm hearing here? And that, you want to, and that might be a good tell. This is one of the questions I kind of had in my background in my mind too. A lot of times I hear from MSPs like, "What's a good, C3PAO?" And I typically like first thing that comes out of my mouth, and I'd like you to validate or invalidate this, is like find one that understands what an MSP is and has worked with them before. Because if you don't, you will struggle.
Agree.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. All right, Brian, thoughts? Over to you.
Yeah, Scott, from the C3PAO chair across the table, what does and I have my own opinions, but I'll hold them. What's a great MSP look like? The moment you start an assessment, what tells you within that first hour, maybe the first 5 minutes, that this client's going to pass? And how do you know when an MSP has set up themselves and unfortunately their client for failure? Do you have any like canary in the coal mine or brown M&M that sticks out that you just know, hey, I've seen this before and this is set up for doom and gloom?
Well, the first control is 3.1.1, and it's around authorizing users access to CUI. Okay. So if the MSP has a big piece of that puzzle or that responsibility, and they're not there helping answer the question in the assessment, then there's an issue. Okay. If the company can't really answer what's going on, and then I've got an issue. Now, there are ways to kind of manage that, right? And that kind of helps me understand whether it's a good MSP, because if I should know well before we start the assessment whether I'm working with a good MSP or not. Okay. I need to have seen, the first thing I look at is the shared responsibility matrix, right? And I should have that way early in the process. And if that's well written and it jives with what's in the system security plan, if those two things are in sync, then, and I know that the SRM was written by the MSP and not the company getting assessed, then I'm in a good place to start, right? I've got a good feeling that this could be a good experience. The second thing is they don't have to have a CMMC level 2 certificate for the environment they're using to support their clients, but it's really helpful for me to understand they know what they're talking about. So if they've done that, that helps me, feel good about what's happening. Then have they sent any people to get their CCP, their CMMC, or a CCA? Do they have any on staff that know the program, right? Do they have one DOW client, or do they have 10, 20, 30, 40 clients? That's another indicator. And then when I sit down with them and talk to them in the scoping call, is there an MSP representative there? Because the MSP is really a critical piece to this company passing their assessment. If they're not there, if they're not part of this, then they're not going to pass. Now, one other thing I want to kind of point out is that if you've gone and gotten your CMMC level 2 assessment, and I'm your assessor in this situation, I'm not going to go super deep on your policies and procedures and your processes, okay? Because somebody else has done that and they've looked at it, okay? Because you have your level 2 cert. I'm going to make sure that the level 2 cert scope matches what you provide in the company, okay, that those match up, but I'm not going to go too deep. I do need to see artifacts and evidence that the MSP is doing and supporting the client the right way, okay? But that's what I'm going to be looking for. I'm not going to be digging deep into their business and what they're doing. I know they would like to think of themselves as FedRAMP and not having to get into the space of, so much. They want more inheritance to happen. In general, the MSPs do.
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't reciprocity between FedRAMP and CMMC. And therefore, I do need to see the evidence that these things are actually happening during the assessment. Hopefully, that probably went a little long on that, but it's a big important.
No, Scott, I think a takeaway for me and any MSPs out there, MSSPs out there that support contractors in the DIB, what Scott said is so important. If you've got clients that you are going to help as an MSP or MSSP, if you have clients that you are going to assist during the CMMC process and you play a role, right? You're providing security protection assets, right? You're protecting their CUI assets. You will lower friction for yourself and for your clients, right? If you have people that are certified and if you have your own CMMC L2 certification, you will lower friction. You will help yourself and you will help your clients. So that's a key takeaway. And really, Scott, it takes kind of part into my next question, but looking at this from the OSC or the DIB client perspective, what's a question or two that they could ask their MSP or MSSP or any of their providers? What's a question or two that they could ask that would maybe help them know that they've got the right MSP or MSSP helping them along the way?
Sure. I think I might have already answered the question, unfortunately, but are you CMMC level 2 certified? How many CCPs and CCAs do you have on staff? Okay. How many companies have you helped, get ready for an assessment? If they've really been involved with these companies, then they should have also been through DIBCAC assessments already, well before any of this happened with CMMC level 2. So have they been through DIBCAC assessments? Will you sit in with me on my assessment? Okay. Now, if I was an MSP, I would charge for that sit-in, right? Because it's time, it's expensive, and there's it's going to take up their time. But that's really important as an assessor.
Great, thanks, Scott. Phyllis, over to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make it a little more positive. It's very the conversation is a little bit intimidating, I think, for MSPs, and they've been, and so I'm going to go off script a little bit. And I know MSPs who are on the fence. Should I invest in CMMC, or should I just not, and then just drop those clients? And then the tenor of the conversation is like, you really have to get your ducks in a row. It's not easy, which is okay. But I just want to, say, like, how can an MSP get started, and how hard should it be for them? Do you know what I mean? Like I don't want to put a dollar sign on it, but so many MSPs are perhaps struggling anyway implementing security on their own networks. And so, what's the overlap you think between like best security practices and CMMC?
So first of all, as we talked about before, Phyllis, there's a huge market here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are a lot of companies that need to get ready that aren't ready. And a lot of these companies are small businesses that they want to make widgets and parts. They don't want to be focused on cybersecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they need partners like MSPs to do this. So there's a business case to send a couple of your people to class to understand this, right? But if I was in the role of a MSP, I would go out and I would look for a partner to help them get ready. Okay. And, ideally, I would probably go down the route of having them look for a C3PAO on the Cyber AV marketplace. And then when they're talking to that C3PAO, have they helped other companies get ready? All right. And then it's you have to make the business case, right, for this. And I personally think the business case is pretty easy, okay, to make. And then if you follow the right process, get yourself ready. And it also involves picking the right tech stack, right? I mean, they're MSPs, and I'm not an MSP, but I've dealt with enough of them. They're around consistency too, right? They want to have, the tech stack they know, the tools they know. And some of those tools aren't going to be able to be used with their defense contracts or customers, right? So they're really going to have to understand you likely need to have two tech stacks, one for your commercial group of customers and one for your DIB customers. Now you don't have to do that, but likely that's how the costs are going to drive you to that direction. And then, just go all in, right? I mean, either you want to help, want to get into this space and, help support the defense industrial base, or, you know what, it's a little bit too difficult for me, I'm not going to do it. But personally, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, of course, I've been doing it for a long time, but it's just, pick the right tools, have the right services you're offering, and be compliant and do the right things, and you'll be fine.
And I'll say, we've mapped controls to CMMC, and there is some overlap there. So it's not like if you are implementing, cybersecurity best practices, you will most likely, be compliant with,
I agree.
many things in CMMC. Now, having to get audited against that, I think is a different story. But so I think that most organizations will not be starting from zero, is my hope.
I agree 100%. Just don't be afraid. Just find the right partner and go.
Yeah. So thanks. So you've obviously been in this space a while. You've watched hundreds of companies prepare for getting CMMC certified. And what is something that genuinely surprised you about how organizations are approaching certification, and something you didn't see 5 years ago?
Boy. I'm surprised at how poorly the system security plans are written.
That's really funny.
Well, you would not. How many
I believe
times?
you. I 100% believe you.
How many times I've come across system security plans that have been written by ChatGPT? I can't count the times. Okay. I'll throw in Claude maybe a little bit. Anyway, and you look at this and you're like going, huh?
Right.
And then they're not following that policy or procedure, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say even when I worked at the agency and we did these kinds of evaluations, it always, now that I'm like writing these frameworks and stuff, you always want the policies and the procedures to be written first, but it's always typically done last, right? It's like,
It
oh,
is.
it's more fun to implement and do this. And then at the end, you try to retrofit, or you're like, even better, now we can just have ChatGPT write it.
So Phyllis, the other thing I see is it'll be like a simple answer that is all I need to answer this control. Okay.
Right.
User sessions are terminated after 60 minutes of inactivity, period. That's all I need to see. And then show me evidence that that's what's happening in the system. Okay. I'll get 3-page treatise on this subject, right? And I'm like, you're killing me. Okay. I don't know if you're trying to like baffle me a little bit and get me off track, but it's just answer the question, right? And so what kind of surprises me is that how many people don't pretend that they're giving themselves an assessment and do it as like a tabletop exercise, right? Do an assessment internally and run exercises and think, if I was the assessor, how would I feel if I had to go find the answer in a 30-page procedure someplace, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
It's to say what you do and do what you say. And I too have seen 311A go on for way beyond, goes into incident response and all this other stuff. And it's like, whoa. I just need to know how you authorize users. That kind of
Yeah, that's it. Just tell me that. Nothing more.
So I'm going to kind of ask a quick question. What is the most unsexy, boring kind of foundational work that almost everyone underinvests in until it bites them? Did we just hear the answer, the SSP, or?
No, I think maybe it goes a little bit to what Brian was saying earlier. I think people spend too much time and money on the cool, sexy IT tool, and they don't describe how it's solving some problem in the SSP. So yeah, I think that's probably, we bought Zscaler, we bought this, I don't know, whatever, but then they didn't correctly implement it. Oh, we bought this new really cool firewall, but we didn't implement FIPS on it, or we didn't do this. They just, they buy these tools, but they don't know why they bought them and what they're going to do. So I don't know if did I answer the question? I don't know. Yeah, I think I sort of did. They're overly investing time on tools and things, and they're not spending enough time on the unsexy act of answering the questions in the in the assessment guide.
You just blew up the whole premise of being an MSP, Scott. This is awful.
All right, I know. Where'd the time go?
I just have one final question, and I think I know the answer, but in your opinion, do you think CMMC is really helping make the DIB more secure? Like, where do you see the real security improvement, and what do you think is just security theater?
Yeah, I hate it when I say Anyway, yes, I do think it makes the DIB more secure. All right. I mean, without a doubt, it's forcing you to have MFA for all privileged and standard accounts and documenting how you do it. That's a good thing by itself, right? Users must be authorized before gaining access to CUI, right? I mean, and if all of a sudden I look and I see 20 users in there that I don't have any, forms that authorize them access, one of those could be a bad actor, right? We don't know. I do think there are some ways to allow. Right now, the POAM is only allowed for 1-point easy controls. I do think that the DOW can accept more risk and allow us to have more controls that aren't met to get more companies through this process quicker, in my opinion. Okay, I think, again, we're trying to be too perfect here. And
Right.
there are ways that we can still secure the DIB and have a defense industrial base without having to have every little nit and dot I dotted and T crossed and everything else. So that would be how I would end this, is that there can be some risk that we can accept.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, everybody out there that stayed on. Scott, this was really, really much needed for everybody to hear it from your perspective. Really appreciate you doing this for the MSP community. And one, I guess, final, just if I heard you correctly, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but take the 4 or 5 full-time jobs that you have off the plate. If you were an MSP, would you? It sounds like you would be all in on this from the opportunity you see.
From what I know, yes, it's a big market opportunity that if you're the good MSPs jumping into this can make a lot of money.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's going to be this wave of companies that have waited, and we're going to be sitting around, and they're going to be looking for a lot of MSPs that hopefully are on this call and ready to go. And hopefully we'll be reaching out to you and the control case team, Scott. So appreciate, again, you coming on here, your service, all you've done, and wishing everybody out there, Brian, Phyllis, amazing day and week ahead. Take care, everybody.
If you're in the Write a Boom community but not in our Discord yet, you're missing where the real conversation happens. Join community.writeaboom.com to access cybercall discussions, upcoming CTFs, boom camps, and early access to what's coming next. If you want to stay close to what's actually happening in the MSP security space, I'll see you there.